pretty much anybody you talk to, anybody you read, anybody you listen to about the offseason, if the Clippers are one, and look, the NBA is a star power league, so I think the Clippers are one with Kawhi and Paul George. It's a pretty short list until you get to the Utah Jazz as far as who's had the better offseason. If you get Anthony Davis, who's a top 5 guy at the age of 26, you're probably on the list, so it's got to be the Lakers. But when you sit back and look at what Justin Zanuck and Dennis Lindsey were able to do in their staff to make these acquisitions leading into the season, what do you like the most? Like, what do your numbers tell you the most?
I mean, we looked at what the problems were on this Jazz team: inability to shoot, lack of point guard play, and they fixed them, right? I mean, you added shooters around Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert that can not only take shots but make shots, and I think that was a big thing. And I think you looked at the Jazz as a bottom 5 turnover team last year, and all of a sudden they have Mike Conley, who is probably the single best point guard in the NBA at not turning the ball over, at being kind of a responsible steward of an offense, if you will. So I think they filled those holes. You look at what Mike Conley has done throughout his career, and even though he is 32 years old, which I think the numbers should tell you to be a little bit pessimistic about a 32-year-old point guard, he had one of the best seasons of his career last season with the Memphis Grizzlies. And so I would say that you think you have probably at least 2 more good years of him left. I think what he brings in terms of, again, being able to control the ball, being able to shoot, being able to defend is at a higher level than what Ricky Rubio brought. And then you add Bojan Bogdanovic, who is just, you look at the numbers, especially the synergy numbers on him, and he really is very good at nearly every aspect of offense, whether that's obviously spot-up shooting. He's one of the best in the league at catch-and-shoot open threes. He's over 50%. You look at his pick-and-roll play. He's very capable of doing that, as he showed last year in Indiana. Off-ball cuts, he's very good at like going up to the top, going around the curl to try to get that screen, and then faking back, going into the rim for that backdoor cut. I think you'll see a lot of Quinn Snyder taking advantage of that next year. And then even in transition, where you wouldn't think someone who is not the most athletic guy, some guys who aren't that athletic have problems in transition. He's actually really good at finishing for whatever reason, just kind of a solid, smart player around the rim. So I think you look at the offensive end, and that's exactly kind of what the Jazz needed at that 4 spot.
So in order to acquire pieces, you have to let some pieces go.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are going to miss Derek Favors, and I think he was a beloved Jazz man who did a lot of great things as a starting 4/hybrid backup 5. To offset that loss, Jeff Green, Ed Davis, your thoughts on the 2 bigs?
Ed Davis is, I think, essentially nearly the same as what Derek Favors is defensively. I mean, Ed Davis's defensive real plus-minus was 2nd in the league last year. Rudy Gobert was number 1. Derek Favors had some great rim protection numbers last year, but Ed Davis, I think, is equally good on that end. Nowhere near as good as offensively, right? Like Derek Favors' ability to catch the ball and finish rolling to the rim is he's one of the top 10 bigs in the league at it. Ed Davis can't do that. So the Jazz will need to find new ways to score with that second unit. But I think that helps. And then I really see Jeff Green as, he's not the same player as Jay Crowder, but I think they do similar things in this Jazz offense, where he's just going to be spotting up. He's going to be taking threes. He's going to make 33% of them like he has his whole career. Not the smartest player. I don't think Jay Crowder was either. I think they both compete on the defensive end. I would say Jeff Green's a little bit more athletic, where Jay Crowder is just more strong. So you shouldn't expect great things, I don't think, from Jeff Green or Ed Davis, but I think they're going to be pieces that kind of make sense as part of the puzzle, that you put them next to Bogdanovic, Conley, Mitchell, and Gobert. You ask them to maybe take smaller roles than their equivalents did last year, and you're in pretty good shape.
I've never been an Emmanuel Mudiay guy.
I'm pretty anti-Mudiay, too.
Yeah, leading up, like draft night, he was supposed to play for Larry Brown at SMU, goes overseas, and then comes back. So as I'm watching tape, I'm like, I don't get it. I don't see what other people are seeing. I get the size and athleticism. I didn't see any skill. I didn't see any decision-making. He can't shoot it. He put up some decent numbers for a really bad Knick team, but to me, that's fool's gold. My fear is, Andy, Mike Conley's 32. A Dante injury isn't 2 weeks. A Dante injury is catastrophic.
Yeah.
Knock on wood, because I've always really liked Dante, and I know a lot of people in the Jazz organization still really like him. So my fear is Conley at 32, either injured or needs a bit of a break, load management, what have you. Dante gets hurt, and suddenly Mudiay has to play 25 minutes a night. Tell me that's not going to happen.
I don't want that to happen, and yet it might happen. I'm with you. I thought Mudiay was definitely a higher risk signing than you would want at that point guard spot. And like, it's hard to complain too much because it's a 1 year minimum deal, right? Like you get the bottom of the barrel with 1 year minimum deals. That's the idea. But I think you look at the only thing he did well for the Knicks last year was mid-range shooting. And even then, I think you're looking at really a Trey Burke kind of guy where he's turnover prone, not a good outside shooter, not good at finishing around the rim, was significantly worse than Ricky Rubio at layups last year. So that's kind of should give Jazz fans an idea. I do think that it's a bet that the Jazz are placing, that he's a 23-year-old kid with length and wants to learn. He said specifically to Jazz management, I want to come here to learn to play defense. So if he can figure out how to play defense, and he was a terrible defender last year and has been a terrible defender his whole career, so this is a big bet. But if he can learn how to play defense, then okay, maybe you're okay. You don't need him to contribute offensively with the other guys on the
And
court.
I'll certainly bet on Quinn. I feel like I've really been able to get to know him over the past few years, and I don't just think highly of him as a basketball coach. I think highly of him as a person, a very smart person who cares about his players, wants to develop his players. We had Jay Billis on earlier, and he said Quinn Snyder is the smartest guy that he played with during his entire career, which I think is pretty fascinating. What do your numbers tell you about what Quinn is good at? And if he's not good at anything, is there anything there?
Coaches are so hard to evaluate analytically, right? Like, so I can't. That's one of those that I honestly can't go to the numbers on. I'll tell you my impression of Quinn, just working with him over the last 5 years or I guess 4 years now, is that he is. I agree with Billis that he is maybe the most intensely intelligent person I've ever met. And I think a lot of intelligent people you meet show that in different ways. I think Quinn shows it through his competitiveness and his work ethic. But he also has an interpersonal way of intelligence that he knows when someone needs something at a certain time.
Yeah, that's well put.
And so I think he's really, really, really unique. I mean, he really is, I think, at like a different level than most of the coaches I've spoken to or known. So, I think you look at it from a tactical point of view. I think his X's and O's are brilliant. I think you talk to some other coaches around the league, and they would agree and put Quinn in the top 5 tactically among NBA coaches. And so, maybe this is the homer in me, but I really do see him as a top 5 NBA coach because of all of those assets I just named.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree. Okay, so let's go in this direction. Vegas likes the Jazz to win the second most games in the Western Conference in the regular season. But when it comes to the title, the Jazz are 5th in the West. Yeah. You kind of understand it, young team, playoffs, all that. How do you look at the hierarchy of the Western Conference? How would you rank the top, let's say, 5-6 teams?
Yeah, I think that's about right. I mean, again, I think the Clippers are number 1 on both of those, and I think that's richly deserved. But I also don't think we'll see the best of the Clippers for most of the regular season. So I think the Jazz have a decent shot at the number 1 seed. I'm not saying they're the favorites for that or anything else, but and then you look at the rest of the top 5. I think we're underestimating Houston a little bit.
Do you really?
I actually I don't from a playoff point of view. I do from a regular season point of view.
Okay.
I think that team even if you just play James Harden, 33 minutes a night, Russell Westbrook 33 minutes a night, and really stagger their minutes so they hardly ever play next to each other. Yeah. That team presents a lot of challenges to a lot of defenses. I think they're a 55-win team. I don't think that they are. Again, they may be a paper tiger in the playoffs. I think they're exploitable, but I don't think teams will have the energy to stop or force the Rockets into doing what they need to do in the playoffs. You're not going to see like the crazy in the regular season. Excuse me. You're not going to see the crazy defensive schemes that teams use against Rockets in the playoffs in the regular season, right?
And not to be the Debbie Downer on this situation, if the wheels fall off for the Jazz, okay, because coming into the season, the expectations are higher than maybe late 90s, Andy. I mean, that's how long it's been since people have talked about the Jazz as legitimate 1 seed Western Conference contender. If the wheels fall off, and we're not speaking health, what schematically could go wrong to make this not work?
I think you look at the age of some of the big pieces, namely if Mike Conley falls off and then all of a sudden you are relying on Dante Exum and Emmanuel Mudiay, you're in trouble. Donovan could be inefficient and not kind of give up the shots that he may need to give up in order for the Jazz to be an efficient offense. And then I would also say that maybe defensively, it turns out you needed more perimeter strength next to Rudy Gobert. I think there is a risk of that. I'm not. I think what the Jazz did was a little bit risky. I mean, it was a risk they had to take because clearly that core had to had found its ceiling, right? But they've invested in some older players. Joe Ingles is over 32. I mean, Bojan Bogdanovic is going to be over 30 for the majority of that contract. So that's kind of the concern, is you just see downturns from some of these guys, and then you need to play some of the bench guys like Moutier that you may not be able to carry the load.